Ta-da.
Try this. Does this work? Hi. Hi, everybody.
Hey, let's rewind.
Yeah. So here's what I'll tell you what not to do. Don't update OBS the minute before you go online.
OBS is the streaming software that we use.
Yes.
Here's what you missed. I said a bunch of brilliant things. I'm sorry. Can you not read lips? Because I said a lot of. I don't remember what they were anymore.
I think you solved the debt crisis.
Yep.
You solved how the Electoral College works.
Yep. We fixed Syria. That whole whatever.
Syria,
that was a mess.
Just Syria in general.
Yeah.
It's all fixed. So way to go. Good job, everybody.
Sorry, none of you wrote it down because I can't remember. And Dom was stunned by my brilliance.
Yeah. Oh well. Anyway, yeah. So it's been about 4 weeks since the last proficiency check. Thanks for coming back and joining us. My guest is Tom Lommel, and we're going to be talking about Monday Night Dungeon Fight. But first, people have been asking me for a post-mortem on Horror on the Hill, and sure, I'll oblige. I don't really have much to say. It was exactly what I expected, and and hardly anything that I didn't. So yeah, I don't know. I had a lot of fun playing it. I think people were like, "Oh, he's so quiet. He's so mad. He's mad at Tom. He's mad at Amy. He's mad at all." And I'm all like, "No, I wasn't like, at all."
All right. So for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, what was it? 3 weeks ago, we had a marathon stream for Free Comic Book Day for. Was it Free Comic Book Day?
No, it was for International Tabletop Day.
International Tabletop Day.
Yeah.
And at what time was it? 3:30 in the morning?
Yeah, it was like 3 o'clock in the morning. I took the hard one.
Dom DM'd a game from 3 to 6:30 in the morning that I played in along with Amy and Space Colonizer and Nick. What's Nick's handle again?
Sungrowler.
Sungrowler. Yes. Yeah. And so it was Horror on the Hill, the classic Douglas Niles.
Yes.
I don't know if it's a classic because I had never really heard of it.
Yeah, it's part of the basic set. It's no Keep on the Borderlands or anything, but yeah.
Even Keep on the Borderlands isn't Keep on the Borderlands. At any rate, so we played, and I guess in hindsight later when I was driving home, I was like, oh yeah, I was that asshole who was just concerned with getting his, character established and making fun of the other characters, right. And way more into playing my own character than I was actually letting the DM advance the plot in any way, shape, or form. And that's entertaining, but that's also kind of it's a little bit of a dick move as a player. I mean, everybody does it at the regular game. If it wasn't a one shot, it would have been more okay.
Right. And when I was planning it, I was like, I'm gonna go. I did. There were some things that I did that I would say, don't do again. One was I kind of railroaded everything right at the very beginning, and that I did that to set up everything else.
With
right?
the one shot though, like you almost have to do it like even more than you did.
That's true.
So.
That's true. There's probably some give and take there. But that's probably the one thing that I would have been a little bit more easygoing with. But
I feel like I really feel like in a one shot you're allowed to say
just say this is
you guys fought valiantly against an army of lizard men. You got captured. You wake up in a cave.
Right.
And everybody be like, whoa, wait a minute, my guy would have easily defeated him. But it's a one shot. Like this is the premise. We don't have time for you to get into your like backstory from like level 1 to level 4 or wherever you are now. Like this is what's happening.
Yeah.
Deal with the given circumstances. We only have 3 hours.
Okay.
Like, so don't feel too bad about that, because I think it, in an ongoing campaign, railroading can be a little,
for sure,
annoying.
For sure.
But you know what? It also is one of those things where in my personal campaign, I did a thing where they fought a dragon, right? And they found out that the dragon was being controlled by drow. So what it really was is they had to fight the drow, and they defeated the drow, and then they struck this bargain with the dragon. Well, we didn't even like negotiate the bargain. I was like, you defeat the drow, and then suddenly there's this blinding flash of white light, and you wake up on the hillside on the outside.
Yeah.
And don't have any, like, the only thing you remember is that you defeated the dragon, like you shot it with an eldritch bolt and it fell into this chasm and snow piled on top of it and it's buried in the ice and dead.
Right.
And they're like, but that's not what really, like, as players, they know that's not what really happened. Like, do we remember the drow thing? I'm like, nope.
Yeah.
But I've managed to, like, make it so that they feel like, oh, okay, there's actually another storyline that we can play out because we've struck this deal with this dragon.
Right.
Anyway.
Right.
It's railroady, but, like, they get something out of it. Right. Anyway.
Right.
So.
Yeah, Zootastic. Was anyone up at 3 to 6 a.m. Pacific Standard Time? Well, we were.
Yeah, we were. Yeah. Why weren't you?
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So, I don't know.
Actually, East Coast people get the best part of that deal. Because normally East Coast people are like, oh, your stream starts at 11:30. I will catch it on YouTube tomorrow.
Right. But yeah, this one they were just waking up for. So we hit the East Coast people. Anyway, I had set it to be, aside from that beginning part, to be relatively open-ended, and that's exactly where the players took it. And I was like, you know what? The people that are going to be at this table are going to take it. They're going to take it, And so I'm like, I'm not going to deal with, okay, this particular fisherman's backstory is his family was, killed by God. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to leave. How am I going to get you guys across the river into here? And according to the module, this is what it says I need to do. But I was like, if I try and do that, it's not going to go. So it's just like, screw it. And I think that's a really interesting point. I mean, I did that last week for Barkies. We started. I was trying to, because Janice wasn't there, so it's like, toss it away. Let's see what we can just do with the table. And sometimes when you've played with people for a long time, you know what they're capable of doing and what they can pull out.
Right.
And so that's I was kind of banking on that. So it wasn't that people were running away with the story or weren't allowing me to do anything. It was like I kind of was planning for that because I was like, I knew I didn't have any, a lot to fall back on. So it's like,
I mean, I think the key takeaway there is like, you have to know your players. Right? So if you have players who show up and it's the end of the week and it's like they're just there to kind of socialize and kind of like lay back and let the story happen and like, kind of like, oh, yeah, I know you got something cool prepared. I'm not going to, if they're not willing to drive, then obviously you have to put a lot more work into it, right?
Yeah.
But if you know your players, and I think too, just in general, if you have a couple kind of like key ideas of what the conflicts are and what's going to happen, and then you're prepared to let your players run a little bit with it, and see where they go, then it's less work for you.
Right.
Don't I like having things prepared and getting excited about them, and go, oh man, I can't wait till this cool moment happens. But like, I never get more than like a session or two away from that sort of idea. You know, oh man, it's gonna be really cool when we have the Duke. You know, the Earl is gonna throw a tournament, and we're gonna all be, you know, like fighting and doing challenges. You know, in a big kind of like Game of Thrones kind of tournament kind of style thing. That's fine, but like if that's more than 3 adventures out, then like you're just setting yourself up for having to railroad to get them back to whatever you've planned.
Right.
So I think, you know, especially with, you know, the players that we have on the channel and the way that people just sort of like spin off of whatever's on their character sheet, much less what you put in front of them.
Yeah, yeah.
Like it's a lesson in being underprepared.
Right. Yeah.
Because really, like, what did we get through? 3 encounters? Not even.
Not even.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to the part where I wanted you to get to, which was you know, perfect. And I think, you know, there were lots of things that we had talked about in this show with chat that we had prepared, and we're like, oh, that's going to be so cool. But you know, I knew in the back of my mind, I'm like, if we hit one of these things, it will be a good, you know, show. So I was like, that's fine. So anyway,
here's the real question, and we have our charity stream for Alzheimer's coming up. Are you going to DM the rest of Horror on the Hill for that?
No. Sorry,
fans. You know what? You need to put the call out. Not this next time, but maybe the next time we have a marathon.
Yeah, maybe for Extra Life.
For Extra Life, demand it.
Yeah,
I'll show up and play. I don't know what the dates are. I shouldn't commit to that, but I'm planning to.
Sun Growler, you guys coming on board? Yeah. So anyway, so that's that. I had a great time. I learned quite a bit, and it actually empowered me to do Barkies. You know, it's like let's try this. Let's try this without any strings. You know, and that's a good feeling to be able to come back and get back into it. You know, I don't know if. And there's other things involved there, like the system and everything. You know, D&D is, I haven't played it as much as a lot of you guys have, especially you know, at the table. I watch it, but I don't play it a lot. So
all right.
But
I will say there is a difference between watching playing and watching and DMing.
True. Yeah. I could play it like crazy, but DMing is certainly a different challenge, especially like things like combat where you're having to keep track of a lot of things. But anyway, I would definitely get back into it and do it some more. So I'll probably be taking stuff.
You know, I do think that we're sort of like we're trained as GMs to like feel like we always have the answer.
Right.
Because that's like your main job is like the players ask you questions and you have to give them an answer, right? But I think, you know, the truth is like you just have to have an answer that's interesting. You don't have to have an answer that's definitive. And that's the part that you kind of like that can get away from you is like you feel like, oh, I have to have the whole plot figured out in advance.
Right.
You know, and I think the key to making an interesting, truly interactive experience, which why play an RPG if you're not going to interact, you know, and let the players have, you know, some skin in the game, is to just give them a challenge and give them answers that spark more interest,
right? As
opposed to kind of funneling them into the answer that you've decided upon.
Yeah,
you know, I have this old GMing trick that I call the rule of threes. And and the rule of threes is you come up with some sort of obstacle, and I kind of want to say it's an impossible thing. You come up with an impossible thing, but you come up with some sort of obstacle, and just as an example, say, okay, you come upon a section of the wall that's carved into the shape of a doorway. It looks like maybe it's some sort of portal, but it's just a blank slate of obsidian. It's just black, smooth obsidian. What do you want to do? Now, here's the thing. I don't necessarily know how it's activated or what it does. Maybe I know, oh, this is, you know, this is the doorway that goes to the treasure chamber on the other side that's warded, or it's a portal to like all the way across the continent to another complex that they need to go explore or whatever. So whatever it's for, like I might know what the purpose is, but I don't know how to defeat it.
Right.
Right. All I know is I've presented something interesting to them, and now I'm going to let them gnaw on it and figure out what it is.
Right.
And so the very, like, I don't know, you might consider this a cheap trick, but the thing that I do is I do what's called the rule of threes, which is the first thing that they try doesn't work. There's a little bit, actually there's a spark of green flame that comes off of it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So then the second thing that they do does not work. Okay, I am going to cast Detect Magic or Knock or whatever on it. No. But again, you see this like curtain of green flame kind of roil up across in front of the obsidian portal. Well, maybe there's something to do with fire. I'm going to hold my torch up to it. Okay, guess what? This is the third thing. Dirty trick. Yep, your torch goes in and you see the blackness begin to just melt away and dissolve.
Yeah.
Can I step through the portal if I hold my torch in there? I don't know. Why don't you try it?
Try. Sure.
Sure enough. Guess what? It worked.
Yeah.
So, the lesson there is you don't have to have all of the answers. You just have to keep presenting them with more and more information that gives them something to work on and makes them feel like they're making progress.
Right.
And ultimately, like, who cares? Like, they feel great because they solved it. And you feel good because, like, I didn't have to go through and, like, read in Grimtooth's traps, like, foomp.
Right.
Oh, it says here the only way to do this is to cast a glyph of warding and then cast an erase spell on it.
Right.
And that acted, who, you know, like, why make everybody work for something, like, really weird and obscure unless you're going to build a whole quest line around it? And even then, you got to give them, like, a hint.
And and it's going to be way more unique and interesting to your party if you're able to kind of roll with that. I accidentally did the rule of threes for the Barkeys game, I think, for some things. So it's like, that's just sort of how it works.
Yes. So some people have tried it. That's the dangerous thing about the rule of threes is if your players know about it, then, you know, obviously, then they feel like they're just, you know, you're just yanking their chain until they try the third thing.
Right.
In which case, you know, like the point of the rule of threes is give them information that's interesting. It really comes down to when they fail, give them more information that leads them towards a success or a hint about something that they should do. Now, if they fail on the first time and they figure it out on the second time, great too. Or maybe, you know, maybe they're just gonna have to kind of leave it as, you know, one of those dangling plot. Well, we'll have to come back to that weird portal. I will caution you that if you think that's an important part of your adventure, but you want to leave it as a dangling plot hook, my players remember stuff maybe 2 weeks. You know, like two sessions back. Two sessions back, they'll be like my players have stuff from 9, 10, 12 sessions ago, like literally stuff that's 6 months old. They have like little tattoos that they got from like a demigod, like, oh, you've been blessed by, you know, and you can activate this from. Never used it. Used it. They've gotten like little copper bracelets that have like a little bonus thing on them. Never use it. Never. They've forgotten about it. And
and this happens. I think players are destined to forget any neat thing that you've done for them. And I mean, Barkeys has done this hundreds of times, where chat has been going like, does he forget he has a deck of many things?
Why doesn't he just use?
Why does it have that healing potion that they got on this really cool thing where it's like it goes Monday night and then sparks fly out and then like steel hits in a dungeon fight.
Yeah, there needs to be one of those like a hammer on an anvil. Ching!
Yeah,
that kind of
exactly.
Thing. Yeah, I would love that.
If anyone knows After Effects way better than me, please.
No, I want some really bad After Effects on this. Do not give Dom any tips unless they're bad tips. Yeah, it's like the most garbage you know, prototype like freeware Maya 3D effects. Like, I don't care if there's flying toasters coming in on this thing. I want this to be cheese-tastic.
Yeah.
So that's yes. So why don't we start with the rules for Monday Night Dungeon Fight? I'll kind of give you the primer that I give to our team of players when they come in. We have about a 10 or 15 minute talk before the stream starts so that they're familiar with the rules and how it works, right? So, where should we start? We do kind of talk through somebody's character sheet as everybody's character sheet as we do this. So there's a couple things that are important.
And if you are a Patreon backer, you probably have access to these documents. If you are a Patreon backer of...
I don't think they have access to the rules. That part they don't.
Oh, the rules the rules
I don't know if you sent that out or not.
The rules, I think they just have the rules, I think, to build a character, not the rules
they have
to the
character
actual
building
game.
rules.
Yeah.
Which I also brought with me. All right, so...
yes, the Saving Throw graphics department is on temporary hiatus for the last 8 years, so...
Every character has the standard 6 ability scores. So, where do I actually want to start with this thing? I do want to say, I wanted this to be based off of D&D. I wanted it to be recognizable, but I also realized from running games on the stream and just thinking about the design or the premise here, which is basically, so the premise obviously is just straight up PC versus PC combat, right? For those of you who are tuning in for the first time, Monday Night Dungeon Fight is 4 gladiators who go into an arena and beat the crap out of each other. Okay, but there was a couple things that I had as goals that I did not want to deal with, and there's a couple things too where it's there are pieces of D&D that are not interesting to the premise as applied, right? So for the most part, skill checks don't ever really enter into combat. If they do, they end up being weird, kind of wonky, kind of oh, well, if I roll high enough on my intimidation check, he becomes frightened or whatever. It's all right, well, it's not worth making a whole subsystem for skills,
right, just
for a couple of situations like that. So I wanted to keep the essence of D&D there, but then I just wanted to turn all the... Where's my hand in? Oh, I'm over here. Then I want to turn all the dials up to 30, literally up to 30.
Right.
So all of the stats, when I originally designed this, go from 3 to 30, although nobody has a stat lower than 10. But I came up with this with stat modifiers that go from basically +0 to +10, and that's what really matters,
right?
On the build, it's not your actual you can have a strength of 30, but the net result, really like D&D, nobody cares if your strength is 9. They care that your strength is -1.
Right.
That's what matters.
Yeah.
So the stat modifiers go from 0 to +10 at the top, let me just talk through the combat system. Let's start there. Okay.
And I'll say, if you are just tuning in, so we've had 2 episodes or two quarter semifinals.
Two. Well, they're not really heats.
Yeah.
I guess there are heats. I don't know. I like to. So in an actual evening of Monday Night Dungeon Fight, that we have 2 heats where there's a qualifying heat and then there's the final PvP battle heat.
Right.
And that's for all the marbles where everybody just fights to the death. In the first heat, it's the teams are split. They're not even teams. The players are split into 2 groups. So they're two players battle it out on one side of the arena, and the other 2 players battle it out on the other side of the arena. And they can't interact. And there's also wandering monsters that screw stuff up. That's your job, is to introduce, move wandering monsters around stuff. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we've had 2 sessions, I guess, of it. We've had 4. We'll have 4 of them, and each winner of those goes on to our final Tournament of Champions on June 20th.
Right.
So, at any rate, so I guess maybe to your point, we're still sort of working through modifying, tweaking, figuring out some of the details, right? So I'm definitely open to. Yes, we've had 2 brackets, 2 out of our 4 brackets.
There you go.
Yeah, very good.
Use some NCAA March Madness.
I watch football. That's as close as I get to sports. That's enough for me. It's 16 weeks. It holds my attention. After anything longer than that,
is that big boy football? Or
yeah, I watch the big boy football.
Okay.
No, my college was terrible at football. They held a record for the longest losing streak back in the 80s.
My college was actually pretty good at it. Anyway, okay.
All right, so So I'm going to go through some of the things that I tweaked in D&D combat. So let's start with the basic idea that it's like D&D, but there's not skill checks. And then we'll get into this too, but forget about there being levels or even really being classes, right?
Right.
So a class is just a theme. It doesn't have, there's no like, there's not a
There's no real value to it.
Right. Yeah. And I did not want to get into a situation which was going to drive me nuts with a bunch of bookkeeping where it's like, well, let's see, will an 8th level wizard be balanced against an 8th level fighter, be balanced against, like, one of the issues with D&D is that it's it's a cooperative game. One of the real big problems with Dungeons and Dragons is that everybody has to work together. Yeah. Well, but from a design point of view, that's definitely an issue, right? Because everybody on the team fulfills a different role. So typically your cleric is a support role, your fighter is a tank up front, your ranger or whatever, or even your wizard may sit up back, or you might have a utility character who can, skill open traps and all that kind of stuff. But those roles completely evaporate when your design focus becomes laser tight on let's fight each other.
Right.
And so then it's not fair that the person who's the healer has to try and beat on the guy who's the tank. Like, it doesn't, that's just not a fair comparison. Right. So I dispensed with, that's one of the reasons I dispensed with the idea of classes as an actual suite of powers and levels as a indicator of what you're able to do, because I did not want to go through and go, okay, so he's a 7th level mage, he has access to these 3rd level spells, no, I was not interested in that. And some characters in D&D are built around the idea that they have a limited number of resources that they have to manage. Okay, I've only got 4 2nd level spells. Which ones am I gonna cast? Whereas a fighter is a little more kind of like solo note of how hard can I beat on this thing, and you might have some battle maneuvers or something like that let you. Give you some resource management. But for the most part, it's I have a lot of hit points and a lot of strength, and I just wail on things. And so my choices are limited, but that also gives me an advantage when it comes to beating the tar out of a wizard.
Right.
So that's one of the reasons I got rid of all of that stuff. So it's weird because people always ask, like, oh, can we make our own characters, and should I bring somebody? And it's like, well, you can, but you have to follow these rules, because a wizard is really just a wizard in name only, and a barbarian is really just a themed set of powers that I've given somebody according to the rules that I've put together. So I've stripped away a lot of guts underlying Dungeons and Dragons in order to make this fair for everyone. I don't want anyone to have like an overwhelming edge, and one of the reasons is because that's a little bit boring from the outset,
right?
And also you guys get to bet on all of this stuff, right? And we're giving you guys a lot of XP if you win, like basically like over a week's worth, right? Like the last person who won got 1,200 XP, and you earn what, 60 in an hour?
Yeah,
something like that.
Yes, you earn 1 XP per minute that you watch the show.
Yeah, so it's like watching 20 hours worth of the show generally if you bet and win. So far, like the 2 weeks that two brackets that we've had, the big winners have won somewhere in the order of about 1,200 XP. That's a lot of hours of the show.
And I will say, the more people that bet, the higher that number goes, and the more that goes out, because it gets distributed to everyone who bet. So anyone who wins gets that back. But if you bet, the more you bet, the more you get back. You get your bet back, plus you get a percentage chunk based on how much you put into the kitty. So
if I bet 50 XP and Dom bets 500, he's going to get 10 times the cash in. He gets his 500 back, and he gets 10 times the share of what I get because he bet bigger than I did.
Right.
So we wanted to keep things. We want to keep things fair and balanced as much as possible, because there's on the one hand it's just XP, but it's a lot of XP for watching the show, for betting on the show.
Yeah.
All right. So in terms of things that I did to streamline combat, opportunity attacks generally, there are opportunity attacks, which is something I sort of put back in. But they only happen generally when you leave the reach of an opponent. So it's a disincentive to play chicken, to like swoop in and then jump out or run away from people. Opportunity attacks don't happen when you charge in. They only happen when when you're like, oh, I gotta get out of here, I gotta leave. And if you pick up a weapon, you provoke. If you do something similar, I think standing up from prone provokes. Generally, I make it a judgment call. And a lot of times you can buy your way out of taking an opportunity attack.
Right.
That's something that I'm sort of looking at because it's making them a little bit meaningless. On the other hand, it burns a lot of rage tokens when people are like, no, I don't want to get hit.
Right.
All right, so opportunity attacks have been streamlined. You also have this. You know what? Let's talk about the base mechanics, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about the fact that you roll 30-sided dice.
Right.
Yeah.
3-0.
3-0. So
Yeah.
you roll a 30-sider. Why did I do this? Well, number one, I thought it was cool. Like, I've had a 30-sider in my dice
And one of you
bag.
ever used it for?
Yeah. Well, back in the day, I remember being at Gen Con and buying like the old like I don't know if you guys remember the Armory. There was this place called the Armory.
Oh,
and
yeah.
they sold dice and things like that.
Yeah.
And they had a book called like the 30-sided guide or whatever. Like, it was this weird, like, it was one of those, like, just a book of charts.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like stuff that you can roll a D30 for.
Yeah.
I don't know how it was any different than rolling like stuff at random out of the DMG, except there was 10 more options.
Right.
Yeah. So on the one hand, what I like about like I was like, it puts a unique spin on the game that you're rolling 30-siders.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what did you get? Well, I got a 27. Well, what's your plus? +2. What?
Yeah. Right.
Whatever. So it was a unique twist. The other thing the things that I really love about the fact that you roll a 30-sider is. Number one, you get those ridiculous numbers. Number two, it gives you the opportunity to crit twice.
Right.
Because I guess your gut instinct is like, oh, it's like a 20-sider, except it goes up to 30. So you crit on a 30 and you fail out on a 1. But then I was like,
no.
Why not crit? Why not still crit on a 20? Like, a 20 is a magical number in Dungeons and Dragons. If somebody rolled a natural 20 on a 30-sider and nothing unusual happened, you'd be like, disappointed, like, and legitimately so. Like,
Right.
you would deserve to like I would have failed at my job. So in Monday Night Dungeon Fight, you crit on a 20 and so you do double damage on a 20. You do triple damage on a 30.
Yep. Double crit and triple crit.
It's part of this whole thing. My two guiding principles in hacking the rules together for this game were number one, how can we make it bigger and louder than Dungeons and Dragons? And number two, I want to roll just piles of dice. I want there to be I want somebody to scoop up 10 dice 6 and throw it in the bowl.
You want Shadowrun levels of dice rolling.
Yeah. Like, I want a meteor swarm to
Yes.
come down on somebody and like obliterate pieces of the battlefield. Like,
Right.
that's what I want. So the D30 gives us a couple opportunities. Number one, you get to crit twice as much, although it's a D30, right? So instead of being critting 5% of the time, you crit 2 times out of 30, which is not much more than 5% of the time.
Pretty much.
It kind of evens out by having a double crit, right?
Yeah.
So the other thing that it allows us to do is, I guess I wanted there to be lots of opportunities for something interesting to happen. Like, my biggest beef, if I'm playing D&D at a big table, is playing a fighter character and initiative starts and I roll crappy and we go around the table, and Tom, it's your turn to attack, and I roll a 7 and the DM goes, that's not enough, you miss.
And you're done.
And then I have to wait another 15 minutes or maybe 25 minutes if the person sitting next to me hasn't thought about what they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that whole like zero result, good or bad, like, there's just nothing that happens it just feels like a wasted effort, right? And I did not want that to happen in Monday Night Dungeon Fight. I wanted the players to feel like, well, even if I missed, I still get something good out of it, right? So that sort of brings me to the second piece of the design thing, which is rage tokens, right? So we got a very generous donation from Campaign Coins. They sent us a nice, healthy sack full of
I will say, James, thank you again. James sent us a very cool holding a bowl, a dragon bowl, basically.
Oh.
That is for I had it holding M&Ms first, but it is really legitimately for campaign coins, and it's going to be perfect for Monday night dungeon fight.
Very good.
But anyway, thanks, James. I just want to give you a shout out.
That's awesome. So we have these rage tokens, and the idea is that even if you miss or you get hit for a pile of damage, you're still going to get some sort of benefit out of failing or having something bad happen for your character, right? So you earn rage tokens whenever you miss with an attack. You earn rage tokens whenever you take full damage from an attack. You earn rage tokens when you roll that natural one, like that's a crit. And when you crit fail, you get so when you crit, just because 20 is a magical number, you get a rage token. When you super crit with a natural 30, you get 2 rage tokens. When you crit fail, you get 3 rage tokens. So the best possible outcome
is to fail.
Like you get a lot of rage tokens for that.
Right.
And then anytime an enemy successfully saves against a magical attack that you make, you get a rage token. So that's for characters who are mostly magic builds.
Right.
That way, that's sort of the equivalent of missing with your attack. Oh, your opponent rolled a saving throw. You get a rage token because they're not going to take the full brunt of your spell.
Right.
So anytime that your damage is mitigated because of a bad roll of the dice, you're getting rage tokens. And then there's a variety of effects that you can spend those rage tokens on. So the whole goal is to sort of build up rage tokens till you get to 10, and then when you get to 10, you get to invoke your super attack. So to me, the mechanic at play there is really like, how can I invest the characters with some sort of charging mechanism where the more that things suck for them, the more that things are set against them, if they can just hold out, they can drop a super attack that's going to actually
level the playing field,
sway the game in a meaningful way. And I think in a lot of ways we've sort of seen that at play. Although the people who tend to drop their big hammer attacks don't necessarily go on to win, which I like. I think that's interesting.
I mean, if it happened every time, then it would, everyone would be trying to do that, I think.
The other thing that the rage mechanic allows me to do is the rage mechanic allows me to give each character a different set of abilities that they can trigger by spending rage. So there's some stuff that everybody can do by spending rage. So they can always reroll an attack roll using their rage. They can always prevent an opportunity attack by using a point of rage. They can parry an attack. They can reduce the damage from an attack that's incoming by spending a point of rage. And they can end an ongoing condition by spending up a point of their rage. So those are things that every character is allowed to do. I don't know. I'm maybe in season 2 of Monday Night Dungeon Fight, we might tweak some of the costs for some of this stuff. It might be a little more costly to parry an attack or to prevent an opportunity attack, just because those things, I don't know, those get used so much that I kind of feel like it's slowing the game down a little bit.
It's almost like a reroll, really. It's just. Yeah, I noticed at least in the last game that almost every attack was being parried by someone.
Yeah.
And which, again, it gets rid of the rage tokens. It kind of levels the playing field in that sense. But it also, if anything else, it just prolongs the inevitable.
Right. Yeah. And I think I just don't want. I'm okay with them changing the amount of damage that they take, as long as everybody has a fair opportunity to do that. That's okay with me. But what I was noticing last session was a lot of okay, you hit. Are you spending any rage to boost your attack? Yes or no? Are you going to parry this attack?
Right.
There had to be a negotiation after every single player's action in terms of are you going to spend any extra? Are you boosting this? And I don't like the way that that's slowing down the game. Not that the game runs long or anything like that, but I feel like there's just a level of negotiation that's starting to feel a little burdensome.
Yeah.
So those are things that you can always do with your rage. But then each character has a specific suite of rage abilities that's unique to that character. At least the combination is unique, right? So if we look at Chester Tickleberry, who is our quote-unquote bard character, his rage boosts are he can reroll 1s and 2s when he resists or parries damage. He can spend a rage to boost his speed by 2d6 squares, and he can spend a rage to gain advantage on a saving throw that he makes. So every character has a little bit kind of like a different combination of those things, or a different suite of abilities. If we look at Bronwyn Broadleaf, who was our ranger character, Bronwyn could reroll 1s and 2s on damage dice, could just make their opponent be poisoned, and they could also get +4 to an attack roll. So if they really wanted an attack to hit, like, he could spend a rage token and get +4 to an attack roll. So that's one way that I can customize that character and give it the feel of, So with the ranger character in particular, it's like, okay, he's really good with his arrows, so we're going to reroll 1s and 2s on damage dice. Also, he's kind of got this like poison theme going on. Like, he's part of nature. He can, use poison arrows and things like that. It seems like kind of like makes sense. So he can actually poison his opponent.
Right.
So that's rage tokens. And I'm fairly happy with that mechanic of how that works. I'm trying to think if so the only other, like, in terms of like only other design philosophy that's at play here is that every attack does a number of d6s, right? And the lowest number that you can do is 2d6, a moderate number, and actually it's kind of like a weaker. Like, the strongest attack does 6d6, and that's what everybody gravitates towards. Mm-hmm. Everybody wants to do as much damage as possible, which I get. And so a lot of people are like, "Oh, 4d6. Well, that's my crappy. That's my crappy attack." Well, usually if it's 4d6, it's because it has the potential to cover more than one character if you can get two characters together. So it either has a wider range, or it might actually have a duration where it persists more than one round. Mm-hmm. Those are sort of the two mitigating factors there. Is like, I'm not going to let you do a full 6d6 and hit two characters. That's an unfair advantage versus the archer who can only hit one character, or the melee guy who can only hit one. So that's the other thing, is I wanted there to be a ton of dice, but I didn't want there to be a ton of math. Right. So I wanted most of the math to be on the dice. So, for instance, you may have an ability modifier of +2, +4, +6, whatever. It only affects that. The only thing that does is it determines your 2-hit roll, right? So if you have a strength that gives you +6, you don't do 6d6 +6 points of damage. I didn't want like the thing that drives me nuts at a regular game of D&D is somebody rolls the dice and then they go, "Yeah, okay, so what did you get?" "Oh, I got a 7. "Oh, okay, great. Sit. +3, +2. I got 12. "Yeah." "Okay, right. You said you got 7. It was 7 on the dice, but then I got all these other modifiers I got to add in." Like, that's fine for D&D, but with this game, I wanted the choices to be fairly straightforward, but with some interesting options. And I wanted the dice math to be as simple and streamlined as possible. You roll 22 points on the dice, you're doing 22 points of damage. Mm-hmm. The other thing that we get to do in with this 30-sided dice mechanic is, I was like, well, what if you roll... So a natural 20 is a crit, a natural 30 is a crit. What if you roll a 24 or a 29?
Right.
Like that. It feels like something more should happen. Mm-hmm. Like you've rolled over a 20 on the dice. Like, we want something cool. What cool thing? And so I came up with this idea of basically something that I call a cunning strike, for lack of a better term. And basically what those are little extra flourishes that you get to add to an attack for rolling over 20, but not critting out. Right? So assuming you hit, and most of the armor class values are fairly low, assuming that you hit, you get to add these cunning strikes to thing. Mm-hmm. So, an example off of the ranger character is the ranger, and these are things that you get to do for free. It doesn't cost you any rage. Doesn't there's no.
It's as long as you get between a 21 and
as long as you roll a 21 to a 29 and you hit, you get to add one of these effects for free. So the ranger gets to disarm an opponent, gets to add 2d6 lightning damage, or gets to reduce an opponent's speed to 0. So now you kind of have 3 interesting choices, right? Like, I can disarm that guy, and maybe the monster that's next to him is going to pound him when he goes to pick up his hammer. Or I can juice it for another 2d6 damage. Now I'm doing 8d6 with my bow. That's pretty cool. Or I can pin them down and make their speed 0. So now I get to do some things that have a minor gaming effect that you would normally have, in a regular RPG. You'd have a bunch of like garbage opposed checks that would again throw you into some crappy subsystem of like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to grapple this guy and restrain him. All right, so now you need to hit, and then you need to make opposed strength checks, but you have a +4 modifier because you're size large and he's size medium, and then like everybody, the grapple system has been crappy forever since they came up with the idea of a grapple system. Well, I've basically like come up with a way to include effects like that without having to worry about making those checks. And a lot of that stuff can just be cleared by spending a rage token. So if the opponent is disarmed and I'm worried about them getting, if I got disarmed and I'm worried about getting hit by an op attack, I can spend a rage token. And if I'm out of rage tokens, well, too bad. That's, that's just the way it is. You spent them on something, right? Yeah. So that's the other piece of the system that I think is really kind of, it's an interesting balance between, you start at 20 and you crank your way up to these sort of overdrive effects. And it still feels like D&D because between 1 and 20 is sort of your normal D&D range, and then from 20 and above, that's where we go into overdrive with. I like to call it the Rage Engine. Stands for really awesome gaming engine.
Oh,
so that's the name.
Did you just think of that right now?
No, I thought of it last week.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, so it's the Rage Engine, really awesome gaming engine.
Very good.
Engine. Yes.
And yes.
So that's an overview of let me see if there's anything on my combat sheet that I missed. So the only other thing that I haven't talked about is there is an intrinsic difference between weapon attacks and magic attacks, right? So melee and ranged attacks are pretty straightforward. You have to roll to hit. If you hit, you do X amount of damage, right? That's like your standard RPG system. But you have the opportunity to fail for there to be no effect other than you earning a rage token when you miss. With magic, you're always going to do some amount of damage. So you're going to cast your spell, and some some damage is going to happen. It's a question of if they make their saving throw, they're only taking half. If they fail their saving throw, then they're going to take the full whatever it is. So because magic always does damage, it doesn't necessarily always get cunning strikes. So that's sort of like 20 and above sort of thing.
Right.
The way that I decided to streamline magic, there's a couple things. Number one, there's not a couple things. There's one thing, which is the saving throws are always based on the type of caster you are. So traditionally in 3rd edition D&D and all of its subsequent, well, even actually going back to like AD&D. So in AD&D, you would make a saving throw based on the source of the magic, right? So it was like you're getting attacked by a wizard wielding a wand, a staff, or whatever it was, right? Yeah. So rod, staffs, and wands, right? Yeah. That was one category of saving there. Wands, and then there was save versus death magic, save versus death magic, and all that kind of garbage. And then we went on to where it was like, oh, okay, well, this is a fire attack, so really you need to make a dexterity saving throw. And this is a charming attack, so you have to make a wisdom saving throw and all that kind of crap, right? Well, I did not want the system to be bogged down in, depending upon what type of damage or effect it was, that determined what type of saving throw that you made. Instead, what I decided was it's all based purely on what type of caster you are. So if you are an arcane caster, all of your spells require intelligence saving throws in order to resist their effects. Mm-hmm. If you are a divine caster, all of your spells, it doesn't matter whether it's a cloud of poisonous gas or some sort of like weird paralytic gaze or thing or whatever, you have to make a wisdom saving throw to resist that divine caster spell. And then finally, charisma is really based around, is essentially analogous to psionics, right? So now, instead of worrying about whether my telekinetic beam is a dexterity save or a fortitude save or whatever you want to call it, it's just you're going to have to make a charisma save. Mm-hmm. Now, what that does is it also spreads around your incentive to min-max your character. So if you want to make a melee guy who's like super brawny and tough, which I actually did last session, and he has plus 10 strength, that's great, but then he's not going to have any modifier to his saving throws and any of that stuff. Right. And usually when I make a character, I try to give them like a plus 2 in one of the 3 caster stats, because you never know, right? Yeah. And I think if you guys, if you Patreon backers out there decide to make your own character, you might choose to make a very defensive character that has like 3+4s in, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, or maybe just, intelligence and wisdom. I don't know. But that's another way that I've like streamlined the system so that it plays a little bit faster and we don't get bogged down in the what different spell you're casting, because we've stripped away class, we've stripped away level, we've also essentially stripped away specific spells. So spells are really just a collection of attributes. They are the save DC, which is generally based on your attribute. They are an amount of damage. They are a range, how far that spell can reach, what area that spell can affect, and then finally, does the spell have any kind of duration attached to it? And the last component to the whole thing is for additional points, and this is all based on a point by system. You can add cunning strikes onto that spell, cunning strike type effects onto one particular spell. So, for instance, Chester Tickleberry has a thing called the Dirge of Dancing Doom, and if his opponents fail the save versus his Dirge, then he gets to add spell strike effects, which is just 100% based on cunning strike effects, to whatever damage he did with his Dirge of Dancing Doom. So his thing is he can, again, disarm an opponent. He can do an extra 2d6 necrotic damage, or he can move 3 squares after an attack without provoking an AOO, right? So that kind of like, the idea there is to sort of model the effects that a bard might like reasonably have, right? Mm-hmm. So I can see him like hypnotizing somebody with his lute or accordion or whatever he's playing, and it causes them to drop their weapon, or it causes them an extra amount of like racking pain, or it allows, momentarily kind of dazes them and allows him to slip away a few squares and get away from the immediate combat area. So those are the thematic things around magic, which is the save DC, which is generally built in, the amount of damage it does, the range, the area that it affects, the duration that it potentially has, and that's expensive because that's annoying to track, and then finally whether it has spell strikes attached to it. So that's kind of that's a high level overview of how Monday Night Dungeon Fight works, how combat works. Let's check in there and see, like, does anybody have any questions, or they want to make an observation about like the design principles, or maybe they have a suggestion from having watched Monday Night Dungeon Fight where things are maybe a little too greasy or a little too slow.
I mean, I would say just there are some questions in chat that we'll get to, but I think everything you said, it makes sense, but it seems like there's a lot at play here, but really once you start playing it, there really isn't, because you've actually boiled off everything that makes it the amount that you can customize in D&D or Pathfinder or anything like that makes a full-fledged character. That's all great, especially if you're playing a campaign. But in a one-off, and then you've said this before, it's like you want the players to start hitting each other.
Yeah.
There's nothing preventing you from doing that.
Yeah.
And I think, like I say, you boiled off any of the extraneous bits that sort of prevent that or make you kind of rethink. It's just like, are you going to hit or are you not going to hit?
Yeah.
That's all it is. And so all of the little technical bits for building a character and the combat system and everything really just play back into are you able to hit or are you not able to hit? And I think that's important to think of if you are going to build a character for this game, or if you're just watching it and you just want to enjoy it. I mean, it's not as complicated as it may sound just on paper. It certainly plays way faster and way better than anything. I think it's just.
I mean, if you look at your character sheet, then you really only have like 2 or 3 choices of things that you can do. And you're right in that I very deliberately took away a ton of defensive abilities. I didn't want people to be able to heal themselves in combat because I felt like that either needs to be something common or it needs to be extremely rare. Because to have some characters be able to heal and some not is incredibly unfair. But the other part of it too is I want to build to that final crescendo of this character is going to finish off this other character, and I don't want to delay the inevitable of your hit points go up and then your hit points go down and then they go way back up again. Right. Unless there's something exciting and dramatic happening in the game, I didn't want that to happen. I also did not want to get into the cat and mouse situations, and I think we got into that a little bit last session where people were kind of a little bit running jockeying away around, and jockeying around for position. But there's definitely there's no invisibility, there's no stealth checks, you can't hide, you can't there are people who can move more than other people, but generally the people who can't move much have an ability where they can drop someone's speed or they can pull people towards them or whatever. So that's in terms of a role-playing game, this is very one-dimensional and probably would be, it would have to undergo some major adjustments to be a full-fledged, fully, rounded role-playing experience. But, like I say every time that we play one of these sessions, it's there's interaction and socializing and combat, and we've stripped off those first 2 pillars of the experience. Nobody wants to convince the bard not to punch them in the face. That's not what Monday Night Dungeon Fight is all about. So
on that note, Monday Night Gaming asks, did you consider a different system to achieve the feel and flow you were going for? And if so, which systems did you consider as possibly better for a gladiator cinematic combat themed game?
I didn't really consider other games, just because D&D is such a classic, and I knew that because I was hacking it, I needed to have it's fun for me to get to sit down and explain here's the design philosophy and here's what's going on, here's why I made these choices. But ultimately, I wanted somebody who didn't know anything about the game to be able to sit down in front of an episode of Monday Night Dungeon Fight, watch it, and still feel like they knew what was going on. Right. So that there's still armor class, there's still hit points, you're still rolling somewhere on a scale of around. It throws people whoa, wait a minute, he just rolled 22. But instead of them going being confused, they're that's cool, what's happening? They're intrigued now instead of being put off. Where if it was something I don't know, if it was something like Shadowrun or something like that, where it's roll percent, or Call of Cthulhu, where it's roll percentile dice, and then you take a D4 plus 2, damage to, one of your abilities, and
in a game like this, a D4 is the last thing you want to be rolling. Who wants a D4?
Yeah. If I could have found a way to like bring a bunch of a handful of D8s into the game or something, or D10s, maybe that would be. Maybe even in season 2 we'll have something where people roll different pools of dice. But I do just generally like here's 6 dice 6. And the nice thing about it is it gives everybody kind of equal footing on the power curve. They don't feel like they're getting ripped off.
Right.
Well, how come he gets to roll 3d10 is more than 4d6 when you average it? I was like, I don't want to listen to that. I just want everybody to be happy that they're rolling piles of dice. So I wanted it to be recognizable. I knew the whole the pitch of the show is that it's a tabletop RPG that it's D&D amped up to 30.
Right.
And so it needed to still be recognizable as D&D. So we still have strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, charisma. We still have the 6 basic stats. You still roll for initiative. You still have saving throws. You still roll to hit, you roll damage. So those pieces of it, the base mechanics, are very familiar to people who've played any version of D&D, right? You don't have to know D&D 5 in order to get it. You don't have to, opportunity attacks don't really, whether you know them from AD&D or not, it doesn't make a huge amount of difference. You still are going to recognize the system as AD&D, but then there's the flourishes on top of it. They go, wow, that guy's rolling a pile of damage for hitting with his hammer. Well, yeah, they're gladiators in an arena.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
a lot of iconic stuff that's been stripped away from it, like the classes and the levels and stuff like that.
Oh, sure.
And yet everybody, nobody would, you go, oh, he's Bronwyn Broadleaf is the ranger, and his powers all make sense as a ranger, and you're not worried about okay, well, wait a minute, is he in the 9th level or is he 8th level?
Yeah, that's what the thing that I like about it is again, it hits that point of they're getting into an arena to fight each other. That's all you need to know.
Yeah.
And it's like watching football or anything. It's they're trying to get down the field to make a field goal. That's the purpose. Anything else, the plays, all that stuff, that can all go by the wayside. This is all you need to know. That guy needs to get that ball down there.
Yeah.
And in this one, this guy needs to kill all the other people.
Guys.
And that's it. And the flavor text, I think, can play out. And we certainly have been working with this, and I think the second season we'll play with it even more. But it's that sort of, pro wrestling kind of feel and everything. Is we can do that. And if you watched Gaurav, who won the first bracket as Balastros the Scorcherer, he certainly has been throwing shade at anyone who is trying to win. So now we have Chester Tickleberry and Balastros the Scorcherer, and that's certainly
for the finale.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting matchup, and we'll see who the other two are. But that's the thing that I gravitated to when you initially pitched this was just the stripping away of anything that kind of almost reimagining the role-playing experience and bringing it down to an almost video game level of unsophistication, as it were. And I think that's, to me, that's the appeal of the game, is that it really is just like watching sports or something like that. It's literally there are some commonalities to role-playing, but other than that, you're watching characters just beat the hell out of each other.
Yeah, and that's where like knowing that that's the premise, that's where all of these design flourishes came into, how can I make the combat experience more interesting? Because I don't just want it to be, well, the barbarian resists a bunch of damage because he's raging and he does a bunch of extra damage. It was, the combats are sort of designed to go 4 to 5 rounds, and that's it. And I want there to be interesting options and choices for everybody involved every time that it's their turn or when it's somebody else's turn. So,
yeah. Well, I think it's also more cinematic that way. You don't have that. you don't go back to the rule book and go like, oh, well, see here it says I'm raging, and so it's just like, no,
you don't have to grind things to a halt.
Yeah, you're a barbarian, and you're bad. Okay, you shrug it off, maybe not, whatever. But it's like keep going.
The good thing is the few times that stuff like that comes up, you just ask it comes to me as the DM to quick make a judgment call. It doesn't take long. We don't have to like slam open a rule book or blah 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 or decide like, oh well, that does D8, so you don't have to reach for new dice.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Bastion says maybe this has been answered for. What kind of thought or methodology went into filling the barrel deck, and has it worked out the way you planned so far?
There's a couple different things with the barrel deck. I would like to develop it more. I think for those of you who watched both sessions so far of Monday Night Dungeon Fight, you saw a definite tweak from session 1 to session 2. It was very clear in session 1 that them having to spend an action to open a barrel was a huge disincentive to using those things. And there, I think only like 1 or 2 of them ended up getting open. They were like either busy like getting chased by a monster or trying to attack each other.
Right.
And the way the scoring is set up. So for those of you who don't know, the way the scoring is set up in the qualifying heat, it's the amount of damage that you do over the course of the combat, and then we multiply that by kind of a multiplier that's determined 100 minus the damage that you've taken. Now all the characters end up having 78 hit points. That's kind of the way that it's worked out with the math that I've put together on the character sheets. But the point being, you want to do the max amount of damage possible and take the least amount of damage possible. But if you're not doing damage, you're hurting your score. So if if barrels cost an action to do instead of an attack, you can open 4 or 5 barrels, but 0 times 50 is 0. You've tanked your score.
Yeah, I mean Tracy was incredibly lucky with her polls.
Yeah.
But it did not avail her of anything.
So that's that's why I'm happy with the change. So the change where it's just free if you're next to them now. So now it's like as long as you're adjacent to them, you can pop one. Not necessarily if you can reach one with your weapon, but you have to be standing next to one. You can pop that for free, fine. And in the last session, we saw everybody like the deck came out like crazy.
Right.
I was fairly happy with it. Now it is. Well, I don't want to say 100% because I'd have to look at all the cards again, but it is 95% balanced. It's 100% balanced in that half of the cards are definitely going to hurt you in some way or form, whether that's minor or major. I don't know that I can balance all of those things out off the top of my head because there's 12 of each, either 12 or 9 of each. I can't remember which. But it's half and half. So half of the cards are going to hurt you in some way, whether that's just do damage to you or maybe give you the poison condition or like really like add some penalty curse dice onto your character permanently, all the way to giving you a permanent hit point boost. The other half of the cards are definitely good cards. So it's sort of like it's a relaxed version of the deck of many things, right? I mean, I love the deck of, that's like one of my favorite things from D&D is, and I remember like very distinctly like encountering one of those sitting in my buddy's dining room and it's like 2 a.m. It's like, oh, you find a deck of many things, like let's go get the cards, and you're like peeling out, and you're like, oh, we don't need any of these 4, 5s, or 6s, let's get rid of those,
right?
And, and then it's like, how many pulls are you gonna do? Like I really enjoyed that aspect to it, and I wanted to bring that sort of chaos factor into the arena. So I'm fairly happy with how they worked out, especially after the tweak of smashing the barrels. I think I could probably, honestly, the only way that I'd really like to change them at this point is I'd like to add a bunch more cards. Not that we went through the deck last time, and I don't think we were in danger of going through the deck. I just like that was one of the last things before I got the game going, is like throwing stuff. I was just throwing stuff together. I'm like, I got to get 12 cards together because I want this to be part of the game, or 20 cards or whatever it was. And so like at the very last minute, I just like eyeballed the stuff. Like, one of the cards that I'd like to add in is a card that either burns or gives you bonus rage right on the spot. So that's one card that I'd like to throw in the deck. Right now, there's nothing in the deck that modifies rage. It like gives you hit points, or might temporarily boost your saving throws and stuff like that. But there's nothing in the deck that modifies rage, and I think we have room to kind of play with like some. I don't want the rage mechanic to be too swingy, because like if that person automatically like gets to 10, it can get a little brutal. But I think there's some room to tinker around things. I will say I am very happy also in the second round in the free-for-all combat, where starting on round 2 you get a rage token.
Yeah.
Starting on round 3 you get 2 rage tokens. Like, I didn't want it to start on round 1 because I didn't want the players to know what was going on.
Right.
But I do like the fact that on round 2 you start building rage.
Right.
Maybe I'll start on round 2 just for like symmetry's sake. I will start giving 2 rage tokens on round 2 and 3. But I like how it starts with 1 and
I
builds
think
its
it's
way
better
up.
with 1. Yeah.
And also in round 1, like, there's a huge incentive for whoever has their 10 to just like drop that hammer, whatever that Storm or Fury power is. Just bust it open.
Yeah.
And that's good. So yeah, I've been thinking of adding like zones on the map where, like, if you are standing in this area, anytime that you earn rage, you earn twice as much rage. Mm-hmm. If you are standing in this area, all of your rage costs you twice as much rage. Oh wow! So that would add some, some incentive to either get in or get out of kind of King of the Hill type of areas. Yeah. And screwing with the rage mechanic that way would be a huge motivation to like try and control that area. And I guess anything that I can do to add an incentive to keep people from basically like roadrunnering, Wile E. Coyoting their way around the map.
Right. On those along that, what is the methodology behind which traps you allow chat to choose? Because like Death Star was available in the first round, but not in the second round. Was it just to try different things, or?
I just want to give each session sort of its own unique feel, and also like as we get deeper in this, I don't necessarily want the players who have seen or played before to be like, in the second round. And especially if like. Because one of the things that's fun about the show is that we have a different lineup of players every week. So one of the reasons I have to keep the game really simple is I have to explain this to newbies every single week. Now, these are people who have played D&D before, so they get the basics, but I have to go through, my sheet of rules. And this is like, it needs to be one sheet that I can talk through quick and talk them through their character sheet, and they go, oh, okay, I got it. But in season 2 or whatever comes ahead, I'm sure we're going to have people return, and I don't want them to have an advantage over somebody who hasn't played. Right. So I want there to be, some chaos and some mystery to what's happening. So that part of it is, I have kind of like an idea of different traps that I can throw in for those sorts of things. But there's the big overriding principle in terms of adding traps onto the battlefield is mostly making it fair for all of the contestants on the battlefield. So I have to avoid situations where, again, because we're basically giving you 20 hours worth, whoever wins this thing gets 20 hours worth of XP. In order to avoid chat rigging the system for or against somebody, I need to make these traps and chat activated bonuses sort of equal opportunity offenders, right? So I need to have something where if you activate this, guess what? I'm going to pick a random color, and everything that's color, every square that's on that color is going to have a fireball go off around it, right? Well, now you can't go, we're going to wait until Tracy's character is in prime position, and then we're going to drop the hammer on everybody else. So I want there to be an incentive for you guys to screw with the things that are going on in the arena. I really want you guys to feel like you have a stake and that you're involved, but I don't want the game to feel rigged. Number one, because I don't think it's a fair betting system of putting XP on the line if everybody can just pull together and everybody wins. But also, I don't want the players to feel like I don't want the players to feel your favoritism. Like, I'm more than happy that like you guys are gonna back a particular player, or there's a group consensus like, hey, we've seen Tracy play for months and months. We love her. She's one of the regulars. Let's all get behind her. That's great. But I don't want the players to feel like, okay, the game is now rigged against them.
Right.
I want your influence to be felt. That chat is against them. That's fine with me. But I don't want them to feel like chat is against everybody except, well, they'd never be against everybody except Dom. They'd always.
I don't know.
I don't want Dom to feel worse about his odds than he already does.
I almost won that first one. Can an enraged owl bear fit in a barrel?
Yeah, I think so. I think that would be an interesting. Yeah, like you pop one and a monster comes out. I think that's perfectly legit.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Or it's just a mimic or something.
Yeah.
Let's see. Add some slide whistles into the barrels. Sure.
We can't do that because all I would do for the rest of the game is sit there and try and play the slide whistle in the worst possible fashion.
Well,
I don't know why you would wish that on the rest of your fellow viewers. It is the worst
possible slide whistle. So combined with the worst possible playing, I am a walking human flump. That's true. All right. So just to quickly recap, so those are the rules in a very basic sense. Now, we mention this because if you haven't seen it yet or you're interested, chat has a way to affect and influence the session before we go. Yes, sorry. I missed this from James. Have you considered adding Grimtooth type traps into the dungeon to lessen the running around at random?
I've considered putting stuff like that in. Again, it's got to be done in a way that feels fair. And then also, like, the first night that we did it, I was a little underprepared with the battlefield part of it. That was the last thing. Like, we were literally doing that, a half hour before the show started. And so we created this minefield thing that, like, frankly, at the end of the night, I wasn't very happy with how it worked out, So, and then we had a grid of, like, there was A through L and, whatever it was, so that the chat could determine where the mines showed up. And then I had to quickly, like, reference. It was a real hassle to go, oh, okay, well, that square is trapped, or that square is trapped, or that square is trapped. And so what I want to avoid is having to do a bunch of, secret map overlay checking. Oh, you moved through that square. This is what happens. So instead, what I want to do is I want to put colored features on the map. So last time, if you watch closely, there were like little red orbs and little blue orbs and little green orbs. Mm-hmm. I think those weren't the exact colors, but whatever. So it was like green and orange and blue or whatever it was. And so the idea there was that if you guys actually triggered a trap, then anything around those particular colors was going to go off. So then I could very quickly look at the map and go, oh, you're standing next to an orange. Yeah, you're going to get hit. You're by a blue. You're fine. You're by an orange. You're going to get hit. And you're over by a green one. You're fine. And then I would know, like, at a glance. But also the characters, the players do not know, like, is it better to be standing by this or by this?
Yeah, last time, it was like, oh, I'm in the blue light. Am I getting healed?
Is something happening in the blue lights?
Yeah, it's like, no.
Which is also something like that we could definitely, like, build in a reverse trap where, you want to give everybody a temporary boost. Everybody who's, standing next to this thing is going to get a free rage token, or they're going to get, a free 2d6 hit points or something like that. So we have the opportunity to do that. But yeah, instead of like creating a bunch of features, and even if I could definitely do something where I would like draw something on the board and, know like, oh, okay, well, these little wood panels, that's actually a trapdoor. Well, what I don't want is I don't want the players to slow the game down going, well, wait a minute. Now, what is this? Like, we had a little bit of that last session. Like, what are these lights? I'm like, those are just glowing panels that glow different colors. You don't know what they do. They don't seem to have any effect. Done. Now, all of a sudden, like, that's eradicated from the board. Like that concern over like, what is this unique feature? Does this do something interesting that I have to ask about before I run in there? Like, now everybody knows what the score is, and unless it actually gets activated, nobody cares. Whereas if I put like, oh, you see that there's a little grate on the floor here. Now all of a sudden we have to stop the combat to have a negotiation about like, well, I want to, and there's no skill subsystem either. So it's like, what are you going to do? Like, make an intelligence check? Like, now all of a sudden we've gone off into a world of exploration that's not our lone core pillar.
Right.
So I want things to feel like there are Grimtooth style things. Giant scythes come swinging across the battlefield and they bash you in the chest or knock you over or whatever. Like, I want that feel to happen, but it's either going to be in features that are attached to features that are spread throughout the dungeon that are all share one common characteristic, or they're going to be attached to barrels. And the other thing that we've done to kind of prevent the running around type of thing too much is like, so in the first session we had a thing that I called the Death Star, where it was basically just like a giant gravity ball, and you had to make a DC 15 or 20 strength save in order to move in any direction that was away from it. Now you could move toward it just a little bit, but if you wanted to move away from it at all, you had to make this strength save. And that like had the natural effect of compressing the battlefield. Everybody started to get closer and closer to that area. Even if you made the strength save, other people were failing and they were getting drawn into it. So now all of a sudden spells have more, efficiency and stuff like that. We have another one, which I don't think we've dropped yet. We have a thing called Wall of Fire. And so if the chat activates the Wall of Fire, it starts at one end of the dungeon and then just starts burning its way this way. And so the area of the dungeon just gets compressed like a trash compactor. So those are I think are effects that we can do that are like global and fair, that don't create a pit stop of description,
right?
And an unfair advantage where the chat can go, oh yeah, well, we want that to attack that guy,
right? Hey, little gamer girl. Yeah, we're talking, as Lift the Game just said, Monday Night Dungeon Fight, which is the show that it airs opposite. I guess it's not really truly opposite. It airs on every other Monday, opposite this show. Something like that.
I alternate with Proficiency Check.
Yes,
so next Monday night, if you have not seen Monday Night Dungeon Fight, do you know, can you pull up who's on the docket for next Monday night? While we're talking about it, yeah. I think Erica Ishii is going to play next week, right?
Erica Ishii is on there. Michael Yates, I think.
Yeah, you're right. I gotta email those people.
Where is
the roster is up higher, I think.
Yeah.
We should have. I can also just pull it up on. No.
That's the interactive.
That's the one.
Yeah.
So next week on Monday the 23rd, one of the guys from Adventurers League game that I play, Alex Escobar, is coming. Erica Ishii is coming. Michael Yates is coming. The guy from... so last week we had a lot of guys from one of my old D&D games come in and sit in. Mike Yates is also one of those guys, so he's going to come. And then improviser extraordinaire Paul Hungerford is coming on Monday night. So it should be a fun and exciting night of Monday Night Dungeon Fight. Yeah, I'm excited for that lineup, and that's the third of our 4 brackets. So we're really we're getting close to the we're at the halfway point.
Yeah, we're just past the halfway point. Let's see here. So that's March 23rd. So tune in 7:30 p.m. on this channel. Hey, iDragon, how's it going? Good to see you guys. Good to see everyone in chat today. Thank you for joining us. Let's see. I don't think I missed anything. Yeah,
okay. Do we want to talk a little bit about character creation and
let's
how
talk
it
about
works?
Character creation. So as I was saying earlier, not only can you donate XP and or cash to influence the proceedings, if you are a Patreon backer of $10 or more a month, you can actually create a character that will be used in a future session of Monday Night Dungeon
Maybe
Fight.
even next week's game.
Maybe even next week's game. Maybe Erika Ishii could be playing your character. So, if that is at all interesting to you, then you must back us at $10 a month, and you get a bunch of other perks and on top of that. But I really want to see what chat makes of this character creation system, because I think that it's pretty.
Yeah, I'm gonna talk you guys through it. If you're not a Patreon backer, guess what? You might want to do that right now. You can back at what, like $10 a month gets you the
$10 gets you the ability to make that.
To make a character.
You also get the.
No, I mean, what level do you have to back in order to get the access to the rules of how to create a character? Any amount?
Yes, I believe any amount gets you the rules, but only $10 amount allows you to actually create one for the show.
And is that a one-time donation? How does that work? Or is it, if you're at the $10 a month level, you get to do it?
You just get it
if you so choose.
Yes.
All right. So I would suggest you go to Patreon /
Saving Throw Show.
Saving Throw. It's that simple.
It's that
really?
simple. Yeah.
It's that simple.
Saving.throw //
No, don't confuse me.
It's Saving Throw Show.
And back, because I'm going to talk you through the rules, but it might be helpful for you to have the actual rules in front of you, right? So just FYI. But if we talk about our characters, this was the part of the whole process that was honestly like the most work for me. Because I wanted to give you guys the opportunity to create characters, and but I also wanted to make sure that whatever you came up with wasn't like super torqued or min-maxed, right? I mean, min-maxed is fine, but not like in a way that was like so outrageous that it got taken advantage of. So I ended up going through, like, if you followed me on Twitter, you saw a lot of like math balancing act happening here. So I think it's in a pretty good place. I've made 8 characters with this thing so far, and I'm pretty happy with the way that they have all come out, right? So the important thing about this is, what is the important thing?
What is the important thing, Tom?
The important thing about this is that it's all a point-based buy system, right? And so, like I said, there's no classes, there's no levels. You could make a Space Marine, and I really was kind of like hoping that somebody in the chat would, basically come up with some sort of kooky, non-genre type of character and say, oh yeah, this is, the cyborg monkey clone.
Yeah, there's no reason. It does not have to follow in any of the tropes or anything that a typical D&D game follows. It can literally be anything. You can build whatever the heck you want.
Yeah. I mean, you're gonna have a hard time modeling like Sue Storm from the Fantastic Four, right? Because there's no invisibility. On the other hand, you could still make a Sue Storm type character who has, force walls and things like that. The way I like to start is with some sort of theme in mind, whether I decide I'm going to build a barbarian, or I'm going to build a cleric, or I'm going to build a bard or a monk or whatever it is. And that way I just sort of have an informed idea of how I want to flavor all of these abilities. So the actual character creation that we're going to talk through here tonight is really just a skeleton of numbers, okay? And it's up to you to add the little bits of flair on top of it that make that character feel like an inferno, pyrotechnic wizard character, or whatever sort of like angle that you want to take it. An evil brain-eating psionic, aberration. So with that in mind, here's the way that it works out. So you have 200 points to spend on your character creation. There's an overriding principle, which is the basic balancing act of the entire thing, which is called the Rule of 40, which means you can't spend more than 40 points in any particular group of things. So your 6 stats, you have 40 points to spend. You can't spend more than 40. So what that prevents you from doing is creating a character that has like strength, intelligence, wisdom, charisma of plus 10, and then maybe 1 good attack. But it turns out he's really good at his attack, and he's really good at resisting magic, and it's kind of an overpowered character, right? So the idea is that you're going to have to, by nature of the limit, you're going to have some flaws. You're going to have some weaknesses. If you want to make a chaotic evil gummy flump, I would love to see that character. Yes. All right. So that's the rule of 40. You can't put more than 40 points into any one given thing, whether that's your melee attack, your ranged attack, your a particular magic attack, your hit points, your spells, etc. Everything maxes out at 40 points, and that keeps everything sort of in balance. You have 200 points total to spend, but you can't crank anything more than 40. Your ability scores range really, like I said earlier, it's based on the modifier. Like I have actual stat values for these things, but the modifier is what's important. So it ranges from 0, which everything starts at a base of 0. There's no like negative stats. One thing that you won't see in the system right now is you can't give yourself more points by taking a flaw or turning an ability down. So you can't get an extra 10 points by taking a -4 on your intelligence or something like that, right? So you're not going to see the sort of tweaking that happens where you go, well, he's got more range, but he does slightly less damage. Maybe in season 2, once you guys tackle this thing and really, tear your teeth into how the character creation works, maybe we'll see some more options for that. But, right now I've made all the characters and I'm pretty happy with how it all balances out. And yeah, characters have a similar feel, but, with either a combination of magic and a particular, like a ranged attack, or a combination of attack plus cunning strikes and their rage boosters, like I really feel, and the traits, that really gives people like a character a unique feel, even though most characters are going to try and do 6d6 damage to someone. That's the most common attack. I'm fine with that. That's okay. It's a pile of dice. It's the same pile of dice. Yep. It makes things a little predictable. It makes everybody feel like they've got an equal shot at doing damage to, at making a big attack. So your ability scores range from +1 to +10, depending upon how high you want to try and crank that modifier. You have to pay more points, right? There's a scale, an escalating scale that starts at 3 points for a basic bonus and goes all the way up to 30 points for a +10 bonus. Your modifier only determines 2 things. It either determines how well you hit. So if you're going to make a melee based fighter, they want to crank points into strength. If you want to make a ranged fighter, they want to crank points into dex. But it only determines the plus. It does not determine the damage. So if you have a character with a +10 modifier in strength, they're doing +10 to hit, but they're not going to do 66 +10 to damage. Important distinction there, right? I didn't want that to double stack into. Again, I wanted to simplify the math. You roll the dice, add the dice up, we're done. Your constitution determines your hit point bonus. You basically get 2 times whatever your con mod is in hit points. Every character that I've built so far has had a +4 con mod, just because that's sort of the sweet spot where it costs 10 points to get a +4. It gives you an 8 extra hit points. It's worth spending that much. You could do a little more, a little less, but also it's a little bit easier to just give everybody the same amount of hit points. So, and then your saving throws, if you're a spellcaster, your saving throws are based on whatever, it's 10 plus whatever your stat mod is for whatever type of caster you are. So if you're a divine caster, it's 10 plus your wisdom mod. If you're an arcane caster, it's 10 plus your intelligence mod. If you're psionic, or I might make an exception if you're a bard, 10 plus your charisma modifier. that's all the ability scores do. They modify your hit points slightly, and they modify how well you attack. So you're probably going to be heavy in one thing. You're probably going to have a moderate amount of constitution, and then it's a matter of, do I want a little bit of bonus on my initiative, because Dex still gives a bonus on initiative? Do I want to make my magic, to try and be able to make magic saving throws and give myself maybe a +4 in intelligence or a +4 in wisdom, +4 in charisma, those sorts of questions. The next thing that we would calculate is armor class. In this game, you don't wear armor. I mean, you do, but it's a flavor effect.
It's a flavor, yeah.
There's no such thing as like buying plate mail or finding plate mail or whatever. Although that would be, that is something I believe that is in the deck. Is like, you use this, you get a +3 to AC or +4 to AC for the rest of the game. So armor class is standard, how hard you are to hit with a melee or range attack. Everybody gets a base of 10, which seems kind of low, but that's deliberate. And then it's 5 points per point of armor class increase. And I've kind of like dinked around with this, but like, I don't want somebody to have a 22 armor class unless they've sunk a lot of points into having a 22 armor class. Because a 22 armor class means that somebody's gonna miss. It's
gonna be pretty
like
hard.
half the time. Well, a lot of people have like a +6 attack or something like that, right? So like our ranger probably, whereas Bronwyn has with his bow, he's +10.
Okay, yeah.
So you're gonna average somewhere in that like 6 to 10 range. But you got to figure you're going to roll on average probably a 15 or 16. So if you got a 22 armor class, that means you're going to miss about half the time. And missing half the time is kind of boring. Again, that goes back to the divine.
You want to be able to hit.
You want people. Well, I want people to get hit.
Yeah.
Like the only more interesting things happen when a hit occurs than if a miss occurs. If a miss occurs, I flip them a rage token. Sorry, let's move on to the next round. Well, there's only 4 or 5 rounds. So if you miss half your attacks, you've dramatically lowered your score on the qualifier.
Right.
So I've made it expensive to pay for armor class.
Real quick, the game rules that you have right now, are those shareable? I did not share the specific game rules. I only shared the character creation rules because the game rules are still kind of in flux. I don't know if
they're a little bit in flux, and I don't know that they're really relevant to character creation.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm sure. I think some people may want to play this at home, which is cool, which would be great if you wanted to do that. And we can certainly talk about that in the future, I suppose. But for now, I think when we'll get rules maybe in a way that you feel comfortable with sharing, and then we can.
Yeah, I mean, for one thing, like when I put the character creation stuff out, the rules were still a little bit in flux,
right.
And then secondly, I think it needs a little more development before it's like I want to take it home and play it. And also, if you watch the 4 and 5, if you watch the first season, or if you honestly just watch this show and took notes, you'd be able to play Monday Night Dungeon Fight at home if you're one of our Patreon backers. So it's not like there's a ton of mystery to it,
right?
But I don't want to and I'll be honest too. Like the other part of it is I don't want to put a package together where somebody goes, "Oh, well, I'll just run this at Gen Con."
Right.
Like it's still my thing. It's still our thing right now, and I want to keep it that way.
Really.
So, whatever. Like, if we did a saving throw, I'd love to do like a Gen Con, tournament type of thing or whatever, or a special event where we bring together, 4 champions and have them battle it out in the arena and have the audience there live and loud and making things happen. And I guess, just on a personal level, I don't want somebody at Gen Con to go, well, I'm running saving throws Monday Night Dungeon Fight thing.
Right.
Like, sorry, I'm still attached to it.
Still got to figure out some way to make that happen. But
if you want to run it at home, great. I'm all for it. Have a great time. But in the meantime, in terms of like it being a public event, sometimes I get weird. I get a little squirrely about stuff like that. Like when I did the Dungeon Bastards World's Worst Dungeon Crawl. Like, I think before I even... No, it must have been after I ran it. But after I ran it, some guys like got together on Google Hangouts and ran their own run of it. And before I was just checking YouTube to see if anybody had bootlegged the event we had videoed, and I came across this thing, and I was like, well, wait a minute, that's mine. On the other hand, like, it was completely charming because they did some stuff in there that was like off the.
Yeah.
There's just as an aside, there's this whole section of the world's worst dungeon crawl that in order to get to 60 pages or 32 pages or whatever it was, I wrote this entire parody dungeon, right? So there was the actual event that we ran, and it was about 8 or 10 pages typed out, written up. But that's how long a 2-hour event was going to be. It was 8 pages or 9 pages or whatever. But that meant I had to like backfill like another like 20 pages worth of content. So I wrote this enormous, horribly complicated dungeon that's just like a big like F you to every DM out there who ever tried to make sense of like one of those old school AD&D modules where you just kept like turning it upside down going, I don't understand what's happening.
Right.
So like rooms were mislabeled on the map. Inside the room descriptions, sometimes it would refer to north as the top of the page, but on the map key, north was to the right. So it was actually the top of the page was east, and it was like all of this stuff. There was like this there was this round robin thing where you would go, with the exception of 2 gargoyles and a small barrel of wine, this room is exactly the same as room 24B. And then you'd go to room 24B, flip, and it'd go, with the exception of a carrion crawler and 9 copper pieces, this room is, and it did that for like a chained loop of like 5 or 6 rooms until if you followed it all the way around, you figured out that it was completely circular and nobody knew what was actually in that room. So anyway,
yeah.
So we're gonna keep this in house for a little bit, but we also might have to develop some sort of special event. Maybe I don't know if it'll happen for Gen Con this year, but maybe Gen Con next year.
Yeah.
We'll do a tournament that they could play over the course of Tuesday or Thursday and Friday, and then we'd have a championship on Saturday.
Right. Yeah. That's true.
That sounds like a lot of work. I already do a thing called Nazcrag, everybody. It's the same deal without all the Monday Night Dungeon fighty stuff.
Right. Yes. Oh, James has the Kickstarter PDF for the World's Worst Dungeon Crawl. Yeah, so
anyway,
going back to where we were.
So for those of you who've pulled up the rules, AC is expensive. Hit points aren't necessarily that expensive. You get a base of 30 plus 2 times your con mod. And well, it is kind of expensive because it's 1 point per hit point, right? Mm-hmm. And again, per thing, you can't put more than 40 points in. So with your AC, you can't get more than 8 points of AC increase, right? So you could sink 40 into your AC. You could have an armor class of 18 if you so chose. That's kind of where it like legally tops out, unless you have some sort of trait that modifies it. Hit points, again, you can only sink 40 points in here, but hit points, like that's your gold, right? So you want to sink 40 points into that no matter what. So that's why everybody has around 78 hit points, because your con mod is only going to float it by a couple points up or down. Even if you had a con of 30, that's going to give you 20 additional hit points. You max out at 90 hit points, whereas everybody else starts off at 78. Well, a 12-point advantage is an advantage,
right?
But it's not so much that's going to wildly swing you into like the tank of the group and make you indestructible.
Yeah.
Initiative is just your dex mod. That's free. But if you want improved initiative, you can spend 5 points and get a +4 of the roll. Initiative is one of those things where it's fun to go first, but it's not wildly to your advantage. It helps, but it's not a make or break kind of thing.
Is that 90 hit points max? Just to clarify.
Yeah. Right now I don't have any traits that
if you kicked it all the way up.
Yeah,
that's where you'd get.
Yeah, that's the highest you could possibly get would be 90 hit points. I suppose the lowest you could get if you decided not to spend any points on this thing, it would be 30. If you didn't have a con mod and you didn't, but you're not going to last long. And also, I find when I go through this process that I have areas where I start looking for places I can spend points. It's like, oh crap, well I've maxed this out and maxed this out, but I can't spend anymore because it's at 40. So now I've got 30 points left to spend out of my 200. Where do I put them?
Right.
You know. On the other hand, like the easy places to put those are like you can always dump some in armor class or whatever. But I always max out hit points. I don't necessarily max out my con mod because the only thing your con mod is good for is a few con saving throws, and then that extra, the difference between 8 hit points and 12 hit points extra on top of it. So it's like you're spending a lot of points to get only a little bit. Yes, Bill Cavalier is exactly the same, except for the addition of 2 gargoyles and a bottle of wine. I think it's
you a bottle of wine,
2 sweatbands and a headband.
That's true.
Is the difference. 2 sweatbands and a tight T-shirt,
and maybe a bottle.
No,
of wine.
the T-shirt's still tight. All right. So your speed is how many squares you can move. I did not want to have to negotiate. Like, are these 5 feet or 10 foot squares?
Right.
I just call them squares. It's that simple. Your base is 6. You get to do that for free. You can juice your speed for 5 points for each additional 2 squares. I may change this just to keep. It's very easy right now to go, oh, you know what, I'm going to throw some more points into speed, and you end up making kind of a speedster character, and I'm not liking the effect that's having on the game. So that is something to be revised, possibly looked at. And then the other thing that you have, which is the next thing you have, which is an interesting mechanic, is you have what I call a master save. So that's one saving throw which you have advantage on every time it comes up, no matter what it is. Now you could decide to make that Constitution, you could decide to make that Intelligence or Wisdom. I have traps that are based on Dexterity and stuff like that, so you could make it on those things. I guess if you're going to be a total min-maxer, I would go for Intelligence or Wisdom. It doesn't cost any points to put it into any of those things. I might have to look at a point value attached to making Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma a master save, because if you're going to save against... I'm going to take some notes here while we're talking through the system. If you're going to have advantage on every single save versus a magic attack that another PC makes, that's a big deal. If you're going to have advantage on a saving throw versus, Dexterity and a trap that maybe only goes off once the entire night, well, who cares?
Yeah, right. So we've got about a little over 10 minutes left. About
really?
13 minutes left.
Okay.
I want to say, so we'll cover some of the salient points here. If you do create a character and you are a $10 level, at the $10 level or higher, and you submit it, that goes to Tom, and Tom will get back to you with notes if he feels that something is not quite right. With a system like this, it's really only, I think, technicalities, that would really merit some sort of,
There are a few things,
maybe the flavor
that, so when you get to stuff like Cunning Strikes, then you get to pick the 3 that you want, right? And generally they're all pretty equal opportunities, but also you get to pick which rage boosters you want.
Right.
And so if somebody finds a combination that I feel is particularly onerous, or they find a hole in the system that I did not anticipate, then obviously I reserve the right to make that character bring it in line with the challenge that the other characters present. So I'm gonna definitely review your character, and I want to keep it as true to whatever concept you've created and whatever stats you've created. But if it feels like you're deliberately min-maxing the system in a way that it wasn't anticipated to bear out, then I'll just make some adjustments to it and we'll work it out together.
Yeah. You can send the characters via Patreon. Just send us a message via Patreon. I will get that to Tom. He will be able to see it. That's just that just keeps everyone honest. I think it just keeps it easy. There's only a few of you that are at the level that can make a character actually. So I know you guys by name now, but we'll keep it that way for now. Yeah. Is there a list of minor abilities and sample cunning strikes?
There is. I do have a list of those. I think they're on. I don't know which character creations link that Dom sent out, because there's two of them. One of them is a Google Docs.
This is the one that I sent.
Okay, so that's the Google Docs version. In the spreadsheet version, which if you go back, I don't know if that.
This one?
Yeah, has that been sent to them at all or not?
No.
Oh, okay. So we can go through and add those to the regular document, or send them that link.
I can send them this link.
Yeah, just if you want to send them that link, that's fine too. So I have a spreadsheet version of this, which is not as like printer friendly. Like what I like about the Google Docs version is I just print it off and it's like 2 pages and I can quick reference it. I'm hoping to kind of like pull a Google spreadsheet together that will start auto calculating all of this stuff, so that when you allocate points, it will start, keeping track of your total, and also like kind of like fact checking, you don't have too much in a given ability or whatever. But honestly, that was more programming and math than I felt like sitting down and doing. Because I'd rather just like walk through and keep track of it, and keep a little scratch paper and keep track of it in my head. So that's the reason I started this spreadsheet, was to at some point build something that will auto calculate. When you get done, that way it checks on you guys. How much you've allocated, etc. So.
I've updated the post on Patreon so that it has both links to the Google Docs character creation. They're both Google Docs, but one's
a Google Doc actually itself.
Yeah, it's like an actual doc, and the other one's a
sheets.
Spreadsheet. So, so now you have both the spreadsheet and the doc to work with. The doc is a little easier for printing if you want to take that on the go. So we just got a few minutes left, but if you guys have any specific questions for Tom regarding Monday Night Dungeon Fight, drop them into the chat and we'll try and take care of them.
I'll burn through the rest of this fairly quickly, right?
Yeah, just go for it.
So attacks are basically like, this is all fairly self-explanatory. So melee attacks are based on, the 2-hit is based on your strength mod. You can spend a lot of points to juice it by a little bit. Damage, again, your base is 2d6, then you can spend a little or a lot to juice that all the way up to 6d6. Reach is 1 square, but then you can juice it to go up to 2 or 3 squares, right? And remember, there's only 40 points, so the whole balancing act here is designed where you can hit hard to 2 squares, or you can hit out to 3 squares and only have a moderate attack, level of attack. It's the same thing with ranged, except that it's dexterity and some of the ranges are different. So you can your range on a ranged attack is base of 6, and then you can crank that out. I don't remember it's possible. The spreadsheet is the master version, and the docs version might have. So if you scroll down there on ranged attacks, I think I changed this slightly. So keep going. Oh wait. Yeah. Okay. No, that is what it is. All right. So you can increase it from 6 to 12 and 18 squares. And then cunning strikes, you pick a package of, it's 10 points for a package of 3, and it only on melee and ranged attacks it applies to both, right? So you can apply your cunning strikes to it doesn't matter whether you're hitting them with your longsword or you're hitting them with your long bow. You can do cunning strikes on either. On magical attacks, if you choose to buy cunning strikes for a magical attack, it only applies to that particular spell. And magical attacks, like I said, because they're not resistible, or because they always do some amount of damage, they're a little more spendy, right? So the save DC is based on the modifier for whatever type you are, as we discussed. The base is 10 plus your spellcasting mod. You can buy a little bit to make it a little bit harder, although that's more expensive because most people don't have ability scores that they're able to save against that. The damage, same thing. You can buy it up. The range has a base of 4, so every spell has can cast some distance. There's no like immediate touch spells in the game. You buy to increase how far that goes, but the range doesn't go quite as far as ranged attack with some sort of ranged weapon. But then it also has an area effect. So the base is it targets one creature. You can buy it up to be a 2x2 square, or buy it even further to be a 3x3 square. And then the one thing that's different, which really hasn't come into play much, but which is different, is that you can get sort of a in magical attacks, it's still the same 40-point max. That's definitely part of the balancing act here. Is if you want things to persist more than one round, you can spend either 15 or 30 points. So if you spend 15, it takes effect on the round that you cast it, and then it lingers for one additional round. If you spend 30 points, it lasts for 3 rounds. Now remember, all of our combats generally go about 5 rounds. So 3 rounds for a persistent effect is pretty potent. That's why that costs 30 points. So you're not going to have like a super powerful spell that lasts super long. Traits on the sheet, there is a package of traits. I don't think on the doc that there is, but I've created stuff. If you have an idea, so you have to scroll. On the sheet, it's definitely there.
Traits.
So, is it not? It's not on there. Look on the power reference. Look on the second tab. There's 2 tabs.
2 tabs.
So you have on the second tab, you have your cunning strike, and then you have an example of your traits. Now you can pick a set of those, and those are sort of like to model like your race or your character type. If you want to pitch me a particular, like you have a new idea for one, or you want to combine some existing ones in a different way, I'm definitely open to that. Although it tends to be like if something seems really potent, I will sometimes give those people something that's a disadvantage. So it's stuff like you can't resist or parry fire damage. If you look at the beastly thing, like they get an extra attack and they earn some extra rage, I decided to give them a hindrance of they can't parry fire damage because I felt like those 2 traits were pretty powerful. On the other hand, some of the stuff like being sneaky doesn't necessarily, like that package doesn't really have a lot of juice. Being able to resist poison is fine, but it's not game breaking. So I didn't give them a disadvantage. So I'm willing to kind of like barter on some of that stuff. But there's a package of traits there, and I'm going to make more as I make more characters. But those will give you guidelines on things. The only thing that gets a little tricky is stuff where it's like add your wisdom mod to your melee attack to hit. That's where you could really like min-max some stats and get a huge freaking bonus on stuff. On the other hand, it doesn't change how much damage you do. It just changes the fact that you can hit all the time. But some of them like add this to your armor class. It's like, well, that's where you really start to get tricky with the system. Rage booster effects are on that same power reference sheet. You get to pick 3. Everybody gets them for free. That doesn't cost you any points to pick those. And then finally, you get to kind of create a Storm of Fury effect. And there are examples there. Basically, you can do 10d6 damage to a limited area that'll probably affect 2 characters, or you can do 8d6 damage to everybody on the battlefield. Those are kind of the guidelines that I use for those types of things. So that's the basic like character creation. I definitely encourage you to have the spreadsheet open. Maybe this is a Word document that's blank that has all this, just has a character sheet in it. I'll maybe try and convert that to a Google Docs sheet and get that posted for you as well. But I hope you're interested in making your character, and I'm happy to work with you on making your character something that's going to work with everybody else in the arena. Because I would love to have somebody else do some of the work on this. But also, I just want you guys to be able to like create a character and root for it and see how it plays out in the arena. I want you to be able to create your own gladiators.
Yeah. Real quick, James had the question under a curse. Does born under a dark sign and all thumbs apply at the same time? A natural 30 is a critical fail, and a natural 1 is a critical hit. If you roll a 6 or less on a melee or ranged attack, you drop your weapon and are considered disarmed.
Yeah.
So can you roll a natural 1 and get a critical hit, but then drop your weapon? Is that how that would work?
I would be inclined to rule it that if you roll a natural 30 is when you drop your weapon.
Oh, okay. Okay.
That seems the most fair. I didn't necessarily pick up when I created those things like, oh, those two things are at odds. Although I do kind of like the idea that you do a super crit and then you drop your weapon.
Yeah,
like
that's pretty great.
That's not bad.
That's if you're going to be accursed, that's going to be a big curse. Yeah. So that's pretty much it. So yeah, and like you guys were saying earlier on, back at any level you can. If you can't back it at a level, that's totally cool too. We take support of all kinds: handshakes, hugs, pats on backs, helping out chatters as we go, like Farquaad was doing earlier. And Farquaad, what you're talking about is Monday Night Monster Squad. So that's because he was asking to be sure to include that the Wolfman has nards.
Okay.
Yeah, different. It's a different show entirely. But anyway, yeah. Thank you guys for tuning in.
I will say that obviously, if you can lend financial support to the show, that allows us to do more and better things with the show. But if all you can do is watch and bet XP and then tell your friends to watch the show because it's a fun time, that's also a huge help, and that doesn't cost you anything.
Yeah.
And we love to have more fans. That's definitely a big part of why we do this.
Yeah, you guys have been incredibly supportive the last couple of months, especially with our big change to the new space and everything, and so we super appreciate that. And honestly, it's now it's just sharing things, retweeting, whatever, getting the word out there and getting more people watching the shows. That honestly helps us beyond almost anything else. So
money's the number one thing.
The money's great.
Like if we could get Dom and hire an assistant editor or somebody else to run the board, so that Dom's not down at the space literally 6 days a week.
Yeah.
Then that would help. So money would obviously, that's the number one form of support that is appreciated, and that will help us all out do a better job. But you know what? We fully recognize that not everybody can contribute money, and we get it. We just need you to help grow the fan base. That's cool.
Yeah. So real quick, so the next Monday Night Dungeon fight is next week at the same bat time. 7:30
Pacific Daylight Time, PM.
Daylight Time. So join us for that. It will have a new lead-in with Megan Caves has a new show on Monday nights. She's streaming Fallout 4. She did it tonight.
Oh, wow.
And that's a knick-knack on every corpse.
It sounds like some sort of weird, kind of knitting show.
She's basically
is it quilted cross stitch?
Yeah, she's like a serial killer, just leaving little bits on every.
That's disturbing, and just a lot of. Yeah, okay, that's fine. Yeah. I like it. I like the idea. Don't get me wrong. That's not me disapproving.
So anyway, so that's going on. Tomorrow, Tyler's got Rhodes Legacy. Wednesday we have Barky's Brigade. GM Mace will hopefully be back for that. Otherwise, it's more Grumps attacking the party. Yeah, I don't know. Thursday we're off. Friday we've got Black Bag, and then Saturday is Dark Sun again. So we've got a full schedule, full days. So yeah, thanks again for tuning in. I'm Dom Zook. This is Proficiency Check. My guest is Tom Lommel, and I will talk to you guys in a little while.
Thank you and good night.
Good night. Bye.